Why you should play V Rising in 2024, especially at full release. Hello and welcome to another V Rising video. So today is going to be a little different. I've never made a video quite like this, but I come from a video making background and I've put a lot of time into V Rising. I've beaten the game over 5 times and started playing the game when it first came out, as I had been following Lock Studios, which are the creators of V Rising. So hopefully this legitimizes my stance as a veteran V Rising, or should I say, 5 Rising player. Anyway, let's get down to the point. Why should you play V Rising in 2024? This is going to be a comprehensive guide. I'm going to be focusing this video mostly on people who've never played V Rising before, but if you are a veteran like me and you want to know what will be happening when the game leaves early access, I will have links to the different parts of this comprehensive guide, and you can skip right to the new update and what you can expect. But why should you play V Rising though? So to answer this question, let's first address the major questions you might have if you've never played V Rising. So what is V Rising? Well, when I get this question, I like to tell people that V Rising is essentially a survival type game, but there is definitely a lot more to V Rising than just that. It plays similar to a game like Diablo with a top-down camera view, but has a combat system similar to that of a game like League of Legends or Dota 2. The camera is adjustable and allows you to traverse while looking around. The game operates in a way in which you essentially play 2 games at once. The first being a base building experience in which you get to create your own awesome vampire castle and do your best to survive against the horrible weather that is only present in one zone. This is a bit of a joke, but to be honest, you can interact with cool weather systems, and even one of the zones has access to a lightning system that can kill you, but is also very visually stunning and nice. The other aspect of the game allows you to adventure about and kill enemies and things called V-Blood bosses. These bosses can either roam around the world or stay in one place. They vary in difficulty based off of the level they are, or can also just be incredibly difficult on first try. I'm looking at you, you fucking frog. I hate this goddamn boss, it's so tough, but anyways, I digress. With the level progression system, you adventure around the world to kill bosses, then take their abilities and powers. This is a really unique system and allows you to feel like you are getting more powerful with every boss you take down. For example, when you first kill the Alpha Wolf, which is the first boss in the game, you then take their powers and can turn into a wolf and jump around like this. It's very cool, but not as cool as this. Yes, you can turn into a bat and travel around. So to me personally, the adventure aspect is my favorite part of the game, and it feels very honed and crafted. There are multiple different zones in the game, and as you progress through them, the enemies and the environment get more and more difficult. Certain zones are even themed. For example, the Gloomrod zones are themed in gothic Frankenstein kind of vibes, and have a lot of areas reminiscent of the tone of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The integration between being a vampire scouting around these zones is fascinating, because you can even go ahead and kill bosses in these zones and take their powers. And since these bosses are adjacent to this theme, you develop different lightning powers. It really helps with the power fantasy tone of the game. I really enjoy the Gloomrot areas, and I think the atmosphere behind these areas is something that just alone checking that out is very fun. So as of right now, the game has 3 final bosses, and once you beat them, you've essentially beat the game. These 3 bosses are known as the Shard Bearer bosses, so they're technically not actually V-Blood bosses. And you can track them down, and if you're playing with other people in like a co-op game, you get to get a passive buff. Well, you get that either way, but you can track them down and find them. So it's an interesting mechanic, and they're very interesting bosses. One big complaint sometimes people believe is that the game is too easy. I personally don't believe that, but I do think the Shard Bearer bosses are there just to ramp up the difficulty, because they're sort of meant for multiple people to battle the bosses at the same time. So they're kind of like co-op bosses in that regards. There isn't necessarily an end result to the game except for the sweet victory of feeling of beating the boss, but the dev team have commented on the game and alluded to the fact that their end goal is to have an end to the story. What this necessarily means, I'm not too sure yet, because the game hasn't come out. As of recording this, it will fully release tomorrow, which is very exciting. but we'll see if there will be an endgame story or a cutscene or something. I would really enjoy it if there was a cutscene, just to cement the fact that you were finished the game. For the longest time, this promise did involve Dracula as a final boss, and as I was mentioning, with the full release of the game right around the corner, it looks like this is going to be the case. Dracula will be the final boss, and you can take a look at him right here. You can kind of notice his red sword and stuff, and I'm very much hoping that he will be quite a tough boss, just because I feel that a final boss in this situation should be quite tough to battle. So this is all very exciting news. But yeah, to further elaborate on exploration, combat, and your base, let's dive into the interaction between exploration and your base. Obviously, the game has a specific progression route, and Stunlock handily indicates the progression you want to go towards in the top left of your screen. You will see in the top left of your screen is kind of like a quest. Similar to quests, there is an end goal, and each little thing you unlock in the game slowly not only makes you more powerful, but gives you more options in general. The developers of the game used to be hardcore World of Warcraft raiders, and so they have an understanding of that dopamine one more quest kind of system that you'd get from a game like World of Warcraft. To further elaborate on this, I feel like Stunlock Studios, they will give you different missions that you kind of have to complete in the top left corner, and each time you complete them, your castle will slowly get bigger, and you as a vampire will get stronger, and you'll get better armor, and so on and forth. And so it really does feel almost like an RPG in that regards. Combat wise, the game is similar to a game like Albion Online, and it allows you to tune the combat based off your armor and abilities. You have different combat weapons you can equip, and unlike a lot of other traditional RPGs, you are not specced into a specific weapon and can't use others. You can use any weapon in the game, and you are able to craft, and this allows for versatility. You can do the same with spells. Any spell you learn, you can combo with different spells. However, you can only have 2 spells slotted at once. Altogether, you have 2 weapon abilities, including an auto attack, and 2 spell abilities. This makes for 4 individualized abilities, and if you add on your ultimate ability, which you get later on in the game, it allows for a lot of versatility in the way you play. So when you get your armor and your weapons, you have a total gear score basically. So if you have a very strong sword, a mediocre armor, you would be middle of the road, whereas if you have a strong sword, strong armor, you would be pretty high up there. One thing that they're planning on doing with the full release of the game, it's not just out yet because all the armors are still the same, but they're planning on customizing the armors based off the way you play. So for example, if you wanted to play like a ranger build, you could spec into, well, you wouldn't spec into, but you could get yourself armor that is like specifically meant for people who want to play with bows and stuff like that. Maybe you'll be a little quicker or something, we'll find out. Additionally, a somewhat recent addition allowed for spell gem slots. This allows you to slot in gems to give your spell special abilities. As of right now, there are 5 different spell schools: Blood, Chaos, Unholy, Illusion, Frost, and Storm. That might have been 6, but I'm not sure, we'll see. I did say Lightning before, but you get the point, it's technically Storm, the spell school. Also forgot to mention that you also get a dash ability for easy traversal, and it acts as a dodge mechanic for enemies and is quite helpful. It's not exactly like something in like Dark Souls where you're dodge rolling, but you are kind of dashing through during boss fights so that you can like basically maneuver attacks. There is a different dodge for every type of spell school. However, I personally enjoy the Chaos dodge the most, just because it damages your opponents when you use it as well. Exploration-wise, you travel through different zones, and there are multiple methods of travel. Once you've unlocked wolf form, you are able to travel faster in wolf form, and later on in the game you are able to ride horses and eventually tame and get your own version of a vampire horse, which comes in either red or green. So very cool. There are also waypoints for fast travel throughout the game. However, you don't abuse their abilities, as you only travel with them when you don't have items in your inventory. At first glance, the world seems massive, but you quickly become acquainted with most of the world due to the accessibility of the waypoints and other travel forms. The feeling you get once you get bat form and can quickly traverse across the world and then drop down is one of the most amazing feelings I've ever felt in gaming, and is personally super fun for me to use. So as I mentioned before, there exist around 80 plus bosses in V Rising right now. They're all relatively unique. They very much vary in difficulty, and in my personal opinion, some of them are super hard and some of them are super easy. So you never exactly know what you're going up against. One encounter I had with the game, you have to go and track down a big bear as a boss. And similar to the Alpha Wolf, when you kill the bear, you take their powers and you can transform into a bear. Because of this, there are quite a few bosses in the game that allow you to transform into different animals that you can use for traversal throughout the world. So for example, there's a frog boss, which I'm pretty sure once you beat it, you can go into a toad form. So this is interesting, and it kind of gives you that idea of you beat a boss, you get its powers. To further elaborate on that, sometimes you won't always take a travel form, but you might take an ability of the boss. So if you go and fight something like Solaris, which is one of the final bosses in the game, which is quite tough in my personal opinion, once you beat the boss, you are able to summon I don't know if it's a witch, but it's one of Solaris's companions, and you use that as an ultimate ability, so you have a companion with you. So yes, you basically go around, you beat a boss, you take their powers, whether that be spells, travel forms, and so on forth. One of my favorite moments in the game is when you come across Krieg, the Undead General, and Meredith, the Bright Archer. These are two V-Blood bosses, and they are roaming bosses from different factions. And when you go to take them down, they can sometimes roam into each other and begin to fight each other. It's quite a fascinating find to come across. And when you do come across it, sometimes you can take out a boss at very low health and then finish off the other boss. Because these two bosses are for different factions, they basically hate each other and they want to kill each other. So with regards to factions, there's not a lot of lore in the game just yet. If you do go through the V-Blood menus, you can notice that there will be a bit of lore for each kind of boss, but there are multiple factions in the game, things like skeletons and humans and so on forth, and these types of, they're planning on also adding, I think, vampire kind of faction for the final boss that will follow Dracula. So these factions will fight each other. And yes, there is also werewolves in the game. There even is a werewolf V-Blood boss, which is interesting. I won't spoil too much about it, but essentially it's a human that turns into a werewolf at nighttime. So this is one other thing that we should talk about, is the day and night cycle. This is very important to the game, and it kind of makes and breaks the game in my personal opinion. You have a day and night cycle in which you can go out at nighttime and take no damage, but in the daytime when you're exploring around, you have to either be in your castle or behind shrubbery or trees, or else you will get burnt and eventually die. And when I say die, you take a lot of damage in that period of time. They are talking about adding a new travel form in order to bypass this. I think it's the spider form, so that you can basically get underneath the floor and hide yourself from the sun. Personally, I like this, but I also am not a massive fan of it, because I think the interactive gameplay you get between having the sun and the nighttime kind of cycle makes it very much immersive from a vampire RPG game. So now, let's talk a little bit about the upcoming full release of the game and why you should especially play now. With a full 1.0 release, Dracula as an endgame boss will appear, and there will be a final boss motive we can try to take down. There will be new endgame content zones with rifts that appear near Dracula's castle. And it's been said that there will be different levels of rifts, lesser rifts and greater rifts. I'm very excited for this content, as one of my biggest complaints with the game is there's only one linear path you can take with the game. You attempt to beat all the bosses and wander around, but there's no versatility and unique encounters you can rinse and repeat. Sure, there are roaming enemies and bosses that will attack each other, but eventually you've seen it so many times that you get used to it. It's not something that you'd want to go back to unless you're tracking down a boss. So hopefully these endgame events will offset this, and maybe it will even allow for interesting endgame content after Dracula. So what are you waiting for? Go buy V Rising. It's great. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.